Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Dana and Rachel. We are two book coaches and editors and besties who discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and lots of laughs. And we are here for our final episode on our current read, One for the Money by Janet Evanovich. But before I let Rachel say anything, swish. Okay.
I was like, this could just be our official intro. Like, we could just use that all the time.
Listen, I'm going to say, oh no, my sister, you're going to have to get your own. No, I can't. No, I will gladly share it. So listen, we are back. This is our fourth episode. And if you're new around here, welcome. What's up? How you doing? I hope you are getting it in. If you are a return subscriber, which you should be, then welcome back. You know that we do these in 4 episode segments where we talk about specific aspects of the story. And this is our last one, which are the editor's takeaways. I think it's important to point out that these are just our takes, and this is just how we see the stories. We actually spend probably just as much time talking over our notes before we get on the recording than on the recording, because we do differ, which makes for a great conversation. And it also shows why this is a craft and not a science, right? It is. It's crafting. And so before we dive into our editor's takeaways for One for the Money, Rach, what you got going on over there?
Well,
come on.
Do you want to? So I just finished reading the book that we're doing for the next month. Since it's your pick, Dana, do you want to tell the people what the book is?
Yeah, no, I like telling the pick at the end, but Rachel shocked me with a piece of information that, go ahead, Rachel. Go ahead. She was coming in hot.
Okay.
I wasn't ready.
I know. I was like, honestly, I was as surprised as you. Like, I was as surprised at myself as you were surprised, because I was like, I can't believe this. So our next book is going to be Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geisinger, which is it's indie published, right?
I believe so, but some of her books are and some of her books are not.
Okay. It is a romance. It's kind of on the cusp of like dark romance, but not maybe exactly. I don't know. I have questions is really. So we got onto the call, and I was like, so I finished our next podcast book, and Dana was like, and I was like, I didn't like it. And she got many sassier words from me that I would not say on a recorded line, because some questionable takes. And but I said that my approach is like, so I shifted into, well, now I need to get curious, right? Of like, okay, what is it that you like about this? What is this doing in romance that I, as a non-romance reader, must be missing, because it just was not for me.
Listen, y'all. First of all, okay, I like to say, let me have my Claire Huxtable moment. Let the record show. Okay, let the record show that, first of all, I think this is it's like great fertile ground for conversation, because as someone who works with romance authors all of the time, once you really know your genre, you are always looking for nuances, right? Where people who have made the exception a rule, or looking for examples to be able to recommend to your clients that they haven't found, but helps to execute a particular thing well. Sort of, if you all go back to, I think it was the second episode in this book, which was our editors, when we were sort of low-key talking about comps, right? Book selections and reading selections as a writer. And so, I don't think it's going to always be everyone's jam. Some people hate alphas. And when they come into romance, they decide they can't stand alphas, so they're not going to write them. And they wonder why readers don't like it. Because they love their alphas. And so we really have to figure out how to create an alpha and have that dynamic for the readers that is in a way that the author and the writer enjoys writing. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is we already know my taste and your taste are just not the same. Now the fact that she didn't like it at all, I don't want to say she didn't like it at all. It just wasn't her jam. I do believe, though, that I told you enough things to help you be like, okay, I get that. And I can even take that other than, not liking it at all. And the last thing that she did, y'all, she just straight up, I thought, I don't know how to say it. I thought the audiobook, I liked the audiobook.
I didn't care. Yes, I'll say gently, I didn't care for the audiobook. It was like, what is happening right now?
Girl, I'm up here, increase your speed.
So I listened to it, I think 1.5 to give me enough to move through it quickly because it's, it's easy to keep up with, but also like slow enough just to make sure that I'm paying attention and not just like flying through it. I will say, so I want to say I didn't care for the audiobook, but I think that the especially the male voice actor, like him as a voice actor, he was very good at being a voice actor. I think that production maybe did not serve him kindly by asking him to do a fake accent is all.
You know what?
I think that was on the production side, that someone was like, no, you got to do it like this. And I just think it's like, but your natural, like your normal voice is good. Why do a fake accent?
Here's what I can say. I think that the book itself is very different. I absolutely love the fact that she carries off having a morally gray protagonist and him having a very layered character. Also, if you are someone who is curious about having sort of a dark romance-esque type of feel without having it totally overrun by mafia or a lot of organized crime, that is something else this book demonstrates. And it is a very straightforward read. I cannot say that I like all of the decisions made by the author. And this is actually, the book is by, Rachel did say J.T. Geisinger. I do consider her one of the authors that I really enjoy reading. I would not say that she's moved to a favorite for some very specific reasons. But as a writer, I do like how the premise and how she sort of puts together her stories. I do. But then there are some things that, because I like to, do I want to say it that way? Yeah, that's what I would say. Which is, I kind of think of her like, I always say she's kind of like a Colleen Hoover to me. There's another author that I think can pull this off really well, and her name is Casey Crown. And I do have to say, as an additional caveat, most of my clients are indie authors. So the way that we move and operate and adjust to market conditions can be a little bit different. It also is why you can have an author that just has a lot of variety under one pen name, somewhat like authors used to do years ago when they maybe had contracts with multiple publishers, and they may have had a romantic suspense with this publisher and a women's fiction with this publisher, but she operates in that capacity now because her readers know that she just kind of flows with whatever the story goes with it. So I think it's going to be interesting to have the conversation. I also think it's really interesting to have those perspectives from someone who doesn't read it, even though you're not the audience, but how you see it can also affect how can you make it better. What are some things that you can do? And I think some of the things that you did not care for are also some of those very reasons that help to give it the esque versus the hard, this is dark romance.
Yeah. I think so. And when you were sort of explaining that to me, I was like, oh, that's right at the crux of a lot of the things where I was like, ooh, you set me up for like he's in the mafia, and I'm like, boy, what's gonna happen? And then nothing happens, and I'm like, where is the stuff? Where is the plot? What happened? Right? And so then you're almost like, it's like almost like a contemporary romance, but then you gave me some dude in the mafia, and I'm like, is that relevant at all? And the answer is not really.
But I always wonder, and I haven't for this particular one, maybe I will, of like, sometimes what you'll find is when an author first dabbles in it and their readers are not accustomed to it, they go on the, exactly. They sort of just get close enough to see what they say.
Yeah.
And then later, because she has some other ones that go in it,
yeah.
that they go all in. And I would wonder, I may actually look into that before we do it. But yeah, she did surprise me.
I'll also say, this is just, I'm not gonna go into details here. But this, so by now, I have read plenty of steamy romances. So like sex on the page, like doesn't faze me particularly. Like I am just kind of like, oh right, of course it's steamy, like it's whatever. And I'm just along for the ride and it's no big deal. This is the first steamy romance that I have read, especially now as I've read many of them, that I had my earphones in and I was like in the middle of like sex scenes and I would go, ugh. Like, just like turn a phrase or like and I would just, like, I've never had that reaction where it's not even like, that's not sexy, that's gross. Like, it's really, so it's like one of those things where I was like, I am surprised at the book and I'm surprised at myself, and it just, the whole thing was like, what is happening? So I think that the reason we're talking about this now is so you guys can get really excited, because I think we have a juicy conversation coming up next week.
Oh my gosh. It's, it's going to just be interesting. I think when it comes to dark romance, girl, I don't know what about the EO sex scenes. However, when it comes to dark romance, I think my angle or perspective on it is I think it's a little bit different, mainly because I've worked with clients where I've worked with them through the process of selecting, building, identifying what was their tone, style, what were going to be the nature of their core conflicts and the types of stakes and what would be on the page and off the page, so that it means that I've had to ask myself a lot of questions and sort of sussing out those nuances so that we can say yes to this, no to this, kind of almost as if we were creating a recipe, right? Yeah. And so some of those things, it probably could have been that, but because I'm in the moment of, I'm not even worried about that part. We're going to get the sex scenes. Let's get to this other part. And there are things that I think that she does well. I thought that just for the flip side, just in case you are like, oh Lord, if Rachel doesn't like it. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I think this is one of those stories though that can be one of those things that is very enduring if you think about it in a sense of, I think enduring may be a stretch, but enduring in a sense that two characters have so much in common and can be so different, and how writing them in such a way can make you feel like, oh, these characters should be together because they seem so different. And he wants nothing more, I love him so much, than to be different, even though Rachel thinks his Irish accent is bad. Oh my gosh. I felt like his backstory was so good. Anyways. And it has this element of it, and I've talked about this before, that I call invisible tethers. And they have these really beautiful invisible tethers that sort of draw them together, that has this sense of commonality that transcends the immediate circumstances. And I think sometimes you need that when you have a story like this, that is, they are from different worlds. They have different, they are from different worlds, but their wounds are the same. Mm-hmm. And the circumstances could not be further from each other, but they're exactly the same. Yeah. And the kind of what fires them up is the same. And I think she probably learned a lot from that one, because the next book, I feel like it's better in delivery on the parts that you're talking about, but I don't feel like it has the same that I get from Lim. And what's her name? Peyton? What's her name? No, Trudy. True.
Yes.
Her name is True. And which I used to love that movie. So that's neither here nor there. Because who didn't love a good Dolly Parton?
It's true, man. I saw 9 to 5 for the first time a couple years ago, and I was like, "This is a revelation."
Girl, gotta love Dolly. So so I think it's gonna be interesting to see what happens.
I think we're gonna have a great time. I will say so my not just my own sort of general conflict avoidant nature, but also my genuine appreciation for art forms that differ from mine, right? So when I read it and I was like, oh, I'm not really into this, my approach is always, okay, now it's time to get curious, right? What doesn't work for me? Why didn't I like it? But then on the flip side, I was like, okay, but what is it delivering for a romance reader, right? So like I literally was like in my phone in my notes app like tracking like what is the right? You always talk about romance as a fantasy, and I'm like, what is the fantasy here? Like what is like Liam as an alpha male? Like what is that fantasy that's kind of being curated here? And also it's a good example of kind of like almost like what readers want in an alpha male and how that character archetype is shaped so that you've got that tough exterior but then is like kind of tragic backstory but doing the best that he can, like these kinds of things, right, that are about how you shape that character, even if he didn't work for me, right? And so changing the angle.
Didn't work for you? Oh, you keep digging a deeper hole.
I know.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
I found him forgettable. Like contrast Liam for me with someone like Knox, and I'm like, give me Knox every day of the week. Like Knox is it.
No, but I think that's where you're like, there's Rachel.
I'm making it worse. Dana's gonna fight me, guys.
She's making my
She's
heart
gonna win.
Oh my gosh. I get it. I think to me, this is the kind of, well, finish your thing, because I totally cut you off. You said he just didn't do it, and it threw me in. Go ahead.
What do you mean he didn't do it for you?
Are you a human woman?
I hope, dear listener, when you read this book, and our first episodes come out, I'm serious, like drop a comment and say, number one, are you ordinarily a romance reader, right? Like, is this your kind of book? And like, what did you think, or like, what was your, like, did you like Liam? Were you convinced by the love story? Like, I'm curious, because I know that I'm not the target audience for this book. And so the fact that it didn't work for me is like, I mean, JT Geisinger has plenty of money. She's like, I can take you or leave you. I don't need you. And so it's like, whatever. And so, but I was, when I'm in that place, when I'm like, okay, this is not landing for me, I'm shifting my perspective to say, okay, but it's landing for someone. Who is it landing for, and why? And what is it telling me about romance and about what romance readers are looking for, right? And just keeping that posture of not just being like, I didn't like this book, but, and just like throwing it out, but shifting my perspective to look at it differently, so that I can take something from it, and so that I understand the genre better as well, because this is a major genre that is a part of the literary landscape. Mm-hmm. It would behoove me to understand it, You
know what? And then she throws behoove. Okay, so
this bitch is out here.
Okay, I promise I love her and she loves me. Okay. Have you ever read the book called Seven Figure Fiction? Is that what it's called? Okay, just add it to your list. It's called Seven Figure Fiction. Now, there's some things that I feel like, and I think she wrote a second book that kind of fleshed out some of the areas that I didn't care for too much. But one of the things that she covers is called universal fantasies. And it's become this thing, like before I think the concept of it existed before she said it. But once she created the book, it has become a thing, right? Especially in romance circles. People will just say UFs. Yeah. Or did you add butter to that story? And that's what she calls this, which it's universal fantasies are all about writing your books around those universal fantasies that readers have. And you are delivering that versus strictly just thinking about tropes. So that it doesn't matter if someone it doesn't like dark romance with werewolf shifters. The universal fantasies of found family, finding a sense of belonging, finding your true home or whatever, speaks louder than genre. And that's the way I would say it. And so it kind of looks like this if you're watching the, well, not kind of, I mean, it does. And so I would strongly suggest, like, one day, like, I heard the audiobook is really good. I've read the book. I have read the audiobook too. But I would say, that's probably one of those things that this does really highlight, of this thing of like, what are the universal fantasies that are at play in this type of a story? There are many that I can say, but I will say that I do think that I think there's a lot of things that are nuances in it that he brings to the table other than the alpha, that like when you get later into the story, how he just wants to be with her. You know what I mean? Like things like that. And they have their ups and downs, but overall, I can't believe you said that. And I have to question our friendship after this call.
Oh my God, you guys heard it here first. We started this podcast like we are editors and besties, and we're going to get to the end of this podcast. She's going to be like, we're editors.
Okay, listen. She is putting something tipsy in the tea. Okay, listen. But I think it's going to make the conversation so good. I do think it also, somewhat like the conversation that we're going to have today, helps us to think about like, what are those things, and do you set people up for those expectations? And I think that's part of it, right? To know that we'll get into some of it, like what he's going through and who he is, and you don't know who it is at first, but baby, you could tell. Because Lynn Black is not playing. Girl, I can't believe you. Anyways, I'm going to get over it. No, I won't. Listen.
Oh, man, I'm never going to leave this. I shouldn't have said anything, guys. I should have just showed up and been like, this was a great book, and here are all the masterful things in it, and just faked my way through those 4 episodes.
I would have known.
Not really a terrific liar as just a human being.
Well, but I know your blanket responses when you just want to give a response versus the real response.
You've seen me in that meeting where I'm like...
deer in the headlights with a smile. So, but I think it's going to make a great conversation. I think it also gives room and opportunity to be even better storytellers, because if it means the difference between someone becoming a diehard fan or someone not, because it's not clear, I think another part of it, which we'll probably talk about more, or maybe we won't because there'll be other things to discuss, but the fact that some of the nuances that you saw are what make it distinctive. Right? Like not having those, I think a lot of times, I think that they were creative choices for you that may not have landed, because it could feel like an open loop. Yeah. And to me, I could see what she was, at least I believe what she was attempting to do. It's sort of like not having certain aspects on the page so that you can be, dark romance has this hit or miss with readers. And a lot of dark romance, whenever you say that, is automatically attached to mafia, organized crime. And so I think sometimes what this is in my book, I would say like a light-esque type of dark romance, but it has the other elements as far as, because I have them in a tier system. I know that's not normal, but I think it is of how you look at it. And I think that's where some of the aspects that you didn't care for, audiobook aside, kind of fell in those places. And I thought they were strategic choices. And we all know choices can go either way. So
yeah. Well, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your tier system, and genuinely, like, because I've also, I haven't read a full dark romance, right? I know what to, like, I know roughly what to expect from a dark romance, but again, it was, sort of like feeling like it split the difference. I felt like it felt like it was splitting the difference between contemporary and dark. Except it didn't fully deliver on either. It's sort of that feeling. But it makes sense when you think about, again, easing a reader into, like, a reader who doesn't normally like dark and giving them some of those elements, right? And so I do think that it's a genre nuance that just is not my particular, like, that was not to my taste is all. Somehow the fact that I'm like, this is a subjective opinion and experience doesn't seem to, like, it doesn't seem to help. So where I'm like, oh, I think it's just not for me. Dana's like, how dare it not be for you? Liam Black, not for you?
it's for everybody, okay?
This
Listen.
opinion is wrong.
Listen, like I used to tell Trevor, I'm going to say it louder for the people in the back, okay?
It's the censored version that you're saying for the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna say a lot for the people in the back. Yeah, no, you know what? I think the closest adjacent, and I think another reason why it shocks me so is because you do love Ninth House, and let me tell you why. I don't think line writing wise it's Ninth House, but I think Ninth House has that sort of esque feeling of almost being like in a realm of dark academia to me, right?
Yeah.
It sort of rides that line, and that's how sometimes how dark romance can be, right? That it's what people come to expect, but you need those dark elements to be able to fully express the themes and to be able to, it's almost like to get the highs of highs and the lows of lows. And I really love a good high low. Yeah. And I think it's sort of, I'm not saying that it is, but I think that's sometimes how I see how people can sort of translate what dark romance is. And I think now it sort of it's gone a little bit wider, because now you can have dark romance in hockey. You can have it in, organized crime, mafia. A lot of times it really primarily is sort of aligned with, like if you have morally great characters, and or sometimes if you have the suspense element that sort of crosses some of those lines that we talked about in this book, where it's like, ooh, like, okay, you were talking about whether it's, harm or physical harm, or whatever, that it sort of has begun to put it in that category so that people can explore those full emotions without people being triggered, because they know to expect that it goes there. And so I think, and then lastly, I would say, I think I wouldn't classify myself as a huge dark romance reader, but I find that a number of the authors that I do read and that I really like, they would be classified as that. But the reason why I like them is because I feel like they explore the range of emotions and the range of how messy relationships can be. Yeah. And sometimes those relationships
increases that range, right?
Exactly.
When you have life or death stakes, or life and death stakes, like the range just blows open as far as, human experience and what you can do, right?
Exactly. And take that and then put on the fact that there's a matter of the heart attached to it. Right? So you have that on top of the fact that I think it's one of the very few places where you get to see, technically in a romance, the true antagonist is the love interest, right? Like that's what the true antagonist of a romance, and in a dark romance, he is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like every once in a while it's a she, but most of the time it's a he. He is. He is the one that is going to annihilate her, and at the same time see her fully. Yeah. And man, if that's not the craziest, bipolarist, pendulum swingingness that you can ever experience, but that's what makes it juicy. Now, I'm going to look right now. Okay, we're going to get into the rest of this because now I feel like...
Almost turned into a beautifully cruel episode.
Listen, I feel like I'm going to have to be ready for this conversation because I am coming. I'm going to be coming.
I'm so confused as to why you're so you're like, I am going to come for you. I'm like, I'm being diplomatic. I'm like, explain to me why it didn't work for me so I can understand it better. Like, I want to appreciate it. Coming after me like I'm trying to antagonize you.
She's going to be a fan. Yeah, she doesn't know it.
By the end of these 4 episodes, she's going to be into it.
Listen, JT Geisinger don't know me, but I got your back, girl. I think you are a girl. My bad. It's JT. It could be anything. But I will say, I looked at her profile real quick, and all of the other ones that are clear dark mafia romances for her were after this. Okay, and I bet that had a lot to do with it. But it may be one of those moments of where you were riding the line too much that you didn't. But I think it was just a really good, because almost all of them were several years later. Some of her bigger series, like she has a series right now that was released in 2 years ago, and it is still number 562 in the overall store.
Oh wow!
It is number 3 and number 5 in assassin thrillers, and it's number 7 in heist thrillers.
Wow.
But I think it's one of those things where when you first do it and you got to see how your fans like it, and if they really like it, then you're like, okay, wait, I can go there. Because the book 2 goes there more, which I think was a great book. And not as good as this one, but it's because of Lim. And so we're not going to talk about it.
I do want to say one more thing to your point, and again, like to the credit of like what was happening with the book, and to something that you often talk about is like, you know, especially as an indie author, you are testing with your audience. Every book you are testing with your audience. What are they responding to? What is working for them? Where are they like, hey, that's not what I signed up for. You are growing, you're getting better with every book, and you are testing and finding out what your readers are wanting. So when you get this book that's sort of like a little bit skirting the line and the people go crazy for it, she's like,
and you go all
okay, then this is where we're going. But I think that there was a huge risk if that's not what she was doing before. If she was just like, ta-da, here's a dark romance, people die. We just jump into that. Her readers, she ran a huge risk of having like a book that readers just hated, right? Versus trying to bring a little bit of both, see how the people respond to the dark romance, but having it light enough so that if they don't like it, there's maybe enough of the other that they still overall enjoy the book, and they're not antagonized of like, I like JT Geisinger's book, but I hate that book, right? And it's avoiding that. And I think I think that's a smart thing to do. It makes sense to me. So it's exactly what you say. I can't figure out. I'm like, she's so mad at me, and I'm like, I'm on board.
I'm not mad. But I do feel like I'm coming for you. However,
like a little bit.
Okay, but I will say I agree with that. You know, I always have my reverse harem story. I have learned the lesson.
That was a specific era in Dana history, and I just feel so lucky I got to be there for it. I was like, you're doing what? And you're like, I'm just trying it. And then you were like, nope, not doing that again.
I had so much fun writing that book. I think it is a good book. But the point is, I think it's and for real, like all jokes aside, it's one of those things. Like I was talking with my students the other day of like, there's only so much that you get from theory. There's only so much that you get from your coach. The rest of it must come from good old fashioned elbow grease, right? It's that you roll up your sleeves and you put it out there and you see what happens. If you have a strong enough back catalog, that book may be a little bit wobbly, but you'll live to see another day. You know, if you keep going and you don't quit, or you take what you've learned from that And so there have been other times where I felt that way and I'm like, ooh, but if I sandwich it this way and I couch it this way and it's worked. Like the first time I did interracial romance in my pen name that's primarily all African American, like I had to be mindful of that. And it did work. And so it's just, but I think, isn't that what makes this fun? Like it's, you know, some stories just require it and you got to just, you know, say it with your chest.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that like no story like has to like in the way that you're approaching your stories is like this is not the only story. So you try it, and if it doesn't work, you write another one, right? You learn from it. Like and it is like writing is a thing. Every art you only learn by doing. And like for all of my clients, right? Like I am like, listen, I will do everything I can. I will give you every resource, every opportunity, whatever I can do for you, I will do. But the only person who can do the work is you, right? Like it's like I will give you everything you need apart from doing the work for you because I literally can't, otherwise it'd be ghostwriting, right? Like this is just, and so that's why we love art. That's why we love to be creative because we get to do it, but it's also the hard part is that you have to do it. And that's what we signed up for when we said we wanted to write, right? So
yeah. Is it
Jana's gonna be so mad for the rest of the episode.
Bro, my recording.
Fuming over there.
No, I'm not gonna be fuming. Listen, I'm gonna say it with my chest. And it's got to be something wrong with her. Y'all, not swearing. But I will say this. This may be like we're all the way left. We're all already in next month's reading selection and a little bit low key we are. But the reason why this connects back to a One for the Money is because at the end of the day, and we're going to talk about this after Rachel gives us the summary, the end of the day, you really are responsible for setting the tone, helping your readers to understand what those expectations are. And the reality is, at the end of the day, whether someone has a personal affinity for it or not, having open loops really doesn't help that if you're attempting to. And sometimes we can do it in sentences that people miss, and we just could have had a little bit better execution, and we don't know that until we do it. And that goes into this story as well, because it is a genre mashup. It is it has very strong aroma of multiple genres, and as far as we can tell, we have not really seen many others that have been able to do this. And so anybody who if you are the core audience for us, other than us giggling and laughing and say it with your chest, you know, that you are here to, you know, to become a better writer, to look at other ways in which you can learn and glean from the books that you read, then some aspect of what we're talking about applies to you. Even if it's just, if you make this choice, be sure that you have a setup, you have some sort of middle, and you have a clear landing, right? That there is opens and closed loops. And I think sometimes if you know that you're straddling that line, you know, that's a hard thing. You never really want to, but I can get why she might have, and why that may have been for her probably a breakout moment, because it maybe helped her to settle into where she really wanted to go. Who knows? One day I may be able to interview her and I can be able to say, I remember one time when my friend said, girl,
don't do that. I don't want her to not like me.
Look at me, Rachel. And she said out of her own mouth, Lynn Black is not for me. Oh, and a hush fell over the room.
I can hear all of our like romance listeners just the like the gasp in the room.
A collective gasp.
Oh my goodness. If you interview JT Geisinger, don't tell her I said that, because I'm a people pleaser and I want people to like me.
Girl, bet nobody say nothing about you but me, because you come with a crazy best friend. Okay? That's when somebody said,
hear that? She said best friend. I'm still in, guys. I'm still in.
After she done talked bad about Lynn Black, she on shaky ground, but I do still love her.
She's on thin ice. She's on thin ice.
Thin ice. So we're going to get her off this ice. I'm going to win her over by the time we get to the end of that book. And then she's going to be like, nope, there's still holes there now. Oh my gosh. Okay, for real. All right, y'all, listen, we're going to talk about the story. We promise. Okay, give us, if you will, our summary before we get into the final sort of takeaways. Y'all, we did talk all about up and down about Beautifully Cruel, but it does come over into one of the big things that we sort of discuss. And I mean, probably in the tune of almost an hour today of going back and forth of how we sort of settled with this genre and how that sort of flows into the reader expectations, how you're building the characters, how you're developing your plot. So it does, all jokes aside, flow in together. But this is great. Go ahead.
So let me get the summary, and then we'll talk a little bit more about expectations and genre expectations. So, in Janet Evanovich's One for the Money, recently fired lingerie buyer Stephanie Plum turns to bounty hunting for her sleazy cousin when her temp jobs dry up and her car gets repossessed. If she wants the $10,000 to pay off her debt and buy back her furniture, she must bring in Joe Morelli, an ex-cop wanted for murder. But Stephanie has no equipment, a dubious understanding of what is and isn't legal, and a crazed prize fighter on her tail, keeping her from both Morelli and the truth about the night Morelli allegedly killed a man in cold blood. And Morelli doesn't just not want to be found, he especially doesn't want to be found by Stephanie Plum. She hit him with her car, it's a whole thing.
You and the end of that summary, I promise you every time, I think something else is gonna come. Rachel, I don't know what to say about you, Mel. Okay.
Just say you love me and it's all okay.
I love you. Okay. So, what are some of the things that you want us to make sure that we cover about One for the Money and our editors' takeaways?
One of the biggest things I want to talk about is how you set up expectations within the story. So setting up your readers' expectations for what they're going to get. And this is what we were talking about just like 30 seconds ago about how Beautifully Cruel connects into this conversation, because this whole conversation we were having about Beautifully Cruel is about my expectations and feeling like what the story was setting up and me being confused about what I was getting, versus being very clear about the central storyline, the through line of your story that you are setting up, so the reader knows, like, they know what they're in for, so that when you deliver it, they're like, oh yes, this is what you told me I was getting. Mm-hmm. So it's about clarity in your story and setting up expectations. And then for me, the other key one was really using, so we've talked in several episodes, or for several books previously, about using the plot to showcase your protagonist. But also, I want to pull this back from our characters episode of not just using the plot to showcase your protagonist, but to really showcase your secondary characters, especially if you're in a series or serial style story. What about you? What are some of the takeaways you wanted to add in for our kind of final discussion?
I want to... I'm sorry. This is tickling my funny bone. So, I have, which goes into my first one, like the blend of humor and suspense. I thought this story did a really great job of it. I think this is funny when you're like cracking up laughing and then you're going to humor and suspense. But the blend, I think, and we'll talk about that, of like how she used it. And I just sort of think that's a nod towards why it could be continue to get this sort of cozy mystery-esque vibe, because of the use of humor. I think it's done really well. Yes. This is also, which we talked about a little bit and I hinted at, I think this one is truly a genre-bending sort of mashup. It reminds me of one of our mutual mentors that used to talk about how every story had a piece of all of those core genres. And this just really does it well. I think the reason why it feels genre bending and almost blurring is because she does deliver on them. And I think it folds into your number one. And the final thing, I don't know if it needs a long discussion, but I think this was a really fast-paced novel. And if you're someone that is really curious about that, I think having a physical copy of this to see what are those chapter openings and closings, chapter length, things like that help move the story along. It does a really great job of that while being, totally entertaining. So primarily the first two, along with the ones that you have, but also just making note of that fast-paced element.
Yeah, and I think that one with the pacing kind of goes back to our plot discussion about those external complications, right? Because there's like constantly something going wrong and a new solution needed, and so it gives it that feel of like, you get, if you get to take a breath, it's like a paragraph when she's like, I finally got to go take a shower, but then when she wakes up or when she gets out of the shower, it's shenanigans all over again. And so it just keeps moving. So every time she turns around, there's some new conflict, there's some new problem that she has to solve, which keeps the story feeling like you're just turning page after page after page, because it really doesn't let up in that way. And so she just really piles on that kind of that conflict, but she piles on the conflict from multiple directions, which is what makes it feel like every time you turn around there's something else going wrong, because it's coming from different directions.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like, after I finish reading and doing my notes, I like to do some general research, and it sort of just classified these books as popcorn reads, right? It sort of reminds you of like how you may want beach reads, or you look for a certain type of book when you're on vacation versus, when you're not. And I think it just delivers well. But when we go to your original statement about the clarity of the expectations in the story, that really is... well, I want you to say what you wanted to say, note about it, because I have a thought or two I want to add to it.
Yeah, so, the main thing here is like, one of the biggest ways you set expectations for your story is through the inciting incident, right? So like, whatever your inciting incident is, that you are telling the reader, this is the primary plot thread that we are following. This is the most important, like, question that the story is asking. And so usually what it also means is it's the very last thing that you deliver on as well, so that you're closing those loops out sort of in the appropriate order. So the more important it is, that usually the later it closes out. And so I think that she did that here. And that's why I'm not fussed about the fact that it's, I think it's more of an action story with the mystery, because she didn't promise me a whodunit. Not really, because the story opens with, the primary conflict of the story is, I gotta get a hold of Morelli, and it just so happens that he's also been accused of murder, and we know that he did it, I think, but it looks right, like, and so that becomes a secondary supporting like thread in the story. And so then, I didn't find the mystery crazy satisfying, but it wasn't the thing that was the upfront promise. So if this had been sold, so just as a counterexample, if this had been sold to me or marketed or set up even in the story as a murder mystery, right? Like, this is Stephanie Plum, amateur murder mystery sleuth, and then the story played out the way that it did, I would have been like, hey... this was no murder mystery. Like, this isn't like, there's, we don't have a suspect pool. We don't have enough clues. Like, there's all these things that it's like kind of missing. And it all sort of just comes together in the end. But the story is set up with, I'm looking for this jerk Morelli. We have this history. I need the money. I don't really care what he did. I need to bring him in. That's what I'm after. And so it becomes a cat and mouse game. And so knowing the story sets me up to get a cat and mouse game. And so I'm just having a good old time watching her try to chase down Morelli. And the mystery is incidental. But what's primary and what's secondary The story makes that clear. And so the point here is that for you as a writer, you want to make it really clear. You want to be clear, and then you want to make it clear to your reader what is the primary plot that we're following and what is secondary, so that you don't cross those signals, and then your reader feels like, oh, they promised me a whodunit and I got an action story. This feels weird.
Oh, now I want to know, do you think that's what happened in Beautifully Cruel?
I will want to go back to the inciting incident and really look at it. But it did feel a little bit like I felt like I was being promised a dark romance, which I think means suspense and adventure, not, that's, kind of the wrong word, but suspense and action. And it wasn't. It's not. Right. Yeah, and so I do think that part of it was that setup. I was like, oh, I'm going to get this kind of story. And then when it wasn't any of those things, it was like, am I in the right book? Where am I?
That's a good thing. Okay. I understand. That's a good thing. I think that also comes down to what we're talking about as well, which is being very clear of the genre that you're going after and what are those expectations. Yeah. I think what happens is, in general, when we use a particular term or we state a certain genre, people have preconceived notions of that, and it may be multiple ways that it can be used. But if you're not clear also in the delivery, it just makes it all feel muddy. So I think that's really good. One of the things that I want to say about what you're saying is is I think this is one of those things that can be really a fine line that people don't know that they are uncertain about. When I get a student asking me, what do you think was the inciting incident? And people sometimes think that is a natural answer, especially in a romance. They think it's the meet cute. The meet cute is not always the inciting incident. Yep. But being clear about what your inciting incident is begins to be this goalpost, right? Or this North Star for your story. And I think this is where, even if you're a great natural writer, adding in some craft, working with someone to get really good at that will help you, because what it then does is, I have found that if you do that well, in this case, what we were talking about earlier, all jokes aside, if the person would have landed that, you could have still not cared for the story, but liked the story in the end and still finished the story. And it's because those things are satisfied, but it's just not their jam. And it won't be everyone's. But I think the goal for us is still to deliver on a whole experience. And so when you identify what your inciting incident is, that begins it pops up, whether it's this timer or this milestone, that we will begin to continue to look back at those key moments in a story to ensure that they align with that promise. And I think sometimes when we talk about this, the promise we think is this squishy thing of what I promise as an author in general, but that inciting incident signals your promise.
Yes, 100%. You are telling your reader what the primary conflict of this story is going to be.
That's right.
What is this story actually about? What is the thing that's going to carry us from the start to the end? What is the question that by the end of this story will be answered, or problem that will be solved? And so that moment is hugely important for establishing expectations. And of course, your first chapter is important. Tone, style, general expectations of, is there going to be, is it going to be steamy, whatever. But that inciting incident is really where you lock in that promise, and your reader draws a conclusion about what your story is about. And so if that doesn't connect with the climax at the end of the story, they're going to be like, I don't know what this story was about. I don't know where I was. And they're going to feel all discombobulated about the experience because they aren't connected.
And I think it's disconnected and they're mixed signals.
Yes.
Right. And I would say that, I think, first of all, I think this is a very big point, no matter what story you're telling. And if you're ever unsure, especially in a story like this, that could be adjacent to so many different genres that being clear of that as the writer, just basically it's almost like, you know, if you're in a bad situation in life, your kids look at how you're taking it. If you're taking it like this is nothing, they're going to get their clues from you. And it's sort of like that same vibe in the writing experience and the reader-writer relationship. Like if you're like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is the beat of the drum. So just basically don't do reverse harem like Dana. Not as way.
You know, I do want to say, just to like kind of round out that point though, not about the reverse harem, but so as I was winding down my subscription, my Substack subscription, like my time writing on Substack, I did a series for over 4 months on the 4-act structure. And when I got to the climactic scene, so what I did is like you got an overview of the act itself, and then I walked you through like the key scene of that act, right? So in Act 4, the key scene of that act is, of course, your story's climax. It's your climactic moment of your story. And in discussing that scene, like, I had to go back and say, okay, like, we can't talk about this scene in isolation because we need to look back at Act 1 and say, what did you promise your reader you were going to give them? What did the inciting incident promise that the conflict or question or problem that was going to get solved by the end of the story? What was that? Because you can't write this scene and write it effectively without knowing what that thing was, because this is closing the loop that you set up back there. And so you have to look back at that inciting incident and make sure, do these two things line up? And so that's just like, even as I was writing the article itself, I was like, listen, like we need to, I was writing it and I was like, I got to recap Act 1 because Act 1 is hugely important for what you're leading to when you get to Act 4 and what you promised the reader you were going to give them. And so it, required a recap of Act 1 and your inciting incident, because those things directly impact what kind of climax you're giving the reader and what kind of moment you're giving them and what question you're answering in that scene.
I think that's so, listen, girl, I may be chewing on this. I think that is such an interesting way to say it. I don't always say it like that. I always think that the inciting incident and the climax are just like they're the opposites of the same coin, right? The very thing that made them hesitant with moving forward in that moment is the very thing that causes them to sort of push back. In the climactic scene. And a lot of times that can be from the emotional landscape, but the external, if you're really doing it right, is just an external manifestation of what's going on the inside. And usually it's the best way you can do it is like the very thing that they were afraid of is the very thing that happens or worse, right? And so I think that's crucial. I think the other part about that I like is that it really does give you this sort of internal gauge, right? You've already written that. Now all I got to do is look at that against this, and is there alignment there? It also sets you up perfectly for your resolution, right? Of what does that look like on the other side of their dark moment, because they have to, well, in my world, get through that and become a new version of themselves that is capable of getting on the other side of that, right? The version of themselves that they didn't know that they could be. And so, I absolutely love that. So with that said, whether it's this story or any story, that alignment should be there. The more that you have it in alignment to where not just in alignment, but I would beg of you to have it as an objective alignment, right? That we all would agree when we see this, that is so that what happens is just like as we sit here talking to each other and we're nodding, your reader is nodding and leaning in. Because they understand what is happening. And I think that's what makes it so that you can sort of have, it's almost as if you can start having all these other things going on, but as long as that thing is a straight line in, it doesn't mean do anything and everything, but if you nail those things, it makes it where readers can be a lot more forgiving and accepting of how you see that story. And so, yeah, I think that's awesome. Anything else you want to add to that?
Not on the, that was, this might be a good way to kind of like lead into what you talked about with, like genre blending, as well as kind of setting expectations for tone and style. So I want to kind of like kick it over to you to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I think we've kind of already talked about that. I think when you have these genre blending moments, I know it's probably easy to just do something because that's what you feel. I think that's the creative thing. And you know what? You're grown. Do you, boo? However, if you want us along for the ride and you want us to enjoy the ride, I would be very clear about what aspects of which one of those things are present in your story and what is driving it, right? Y'all, I wish I knew about football. One day I'm going to know about football. I'm going to know what all them people that look the same on the field are doing, to give this sort of analogy, but I don't today. So I'm just going to say,
I'm so confused where this is going.
I know. Like, I'm thinking, all right, I can't tell you because I don't think you know either. But like, you have a team lead, right? Like, you may have all these people on the field that are skilled, that get paid a lot, but they still listen to one person, right, on the field. Yeah, the coach is on the sideline. Yeah, I know I'm messing this up, but y'all know what I mean. Like, but there's one thing that is taking the lead, and that lead genre, or that primary genre, is one of those that you really want to get right. And the others that you are dancing with or that you are shacking with, you want to make sure that you still have a beginning, middle, and an end. You want to make sure that when you open that loop, you close that loop. Like, it really is that simple. And sometimes I'll even be very template style of like, did you talk about it 3 times? At least 3 times. Mm-hmm. Each one of them, did we get that feel at least 3 times? Then does it have to be 3? Like, this is not set in stone, but if you can find where you've had some sort of brush with it at least a few times, and you know that it's there enough to be a real thing and not just this sort of cursory touch on it. And I think having a sense of clarity about mixing those will help you when you're editing to ensure that they are cohesive. Yeah. One of the things that she does in this story so well, we cannot pick them apart because you cannot pull them apart. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like if you pull it apart, it all will come tumbling down because it's blended, and that's what you want. That's when you can do whatever the heck you want in a story. You want creative freedom, master that.
Yeah. Man, that real talk. To put that down, write that down.
Right. You just master that to where it's almost like spaghetti, like wound and intertwined with each other. So there is no separation. And so knowing what those are, and when you begin to blend those, know what are your primary and know how each one of them show up so that you are ensured that you sort of have that beginning, middle, and end, and that loop is closed. Especially when you have a story like this that is a serial in form, and that a lot of those are not fully closed. There's always a window cracked, right? Or another lead in somewhere. But you want to ensure that this book is contained in of itself. And if it's not, that readers know to expect that. Right? Yeah. Because sometimes you do have an overarching thread. Like for this book, this segment is closed, but there's still another part of it that needs to see its way to the end. And so that's what I meant by genre blending, because this is just, it's that. Yeah. Did you want to add anything else to that before we get to the plot, primary and secondary, for using the plot to highlight your characters?
I'm just going to kind of like give a yes, amen to that, by saying... but I've been hanging out with you for a long time when I start saying stuff like that. This is really how you can, knowing what that central story is, this is how you add those other genre elements to lift the story so that they don't distract, but they make it better. So you brought up Ninth House earlier, and I think about Ninth House as doing this because it's sort of like, okay, we have this core story, which is like a crime story, and we know that we're in an urban fantasy environment, right? As in, we're in the regular world, but there's magic in it. So we have that. But then, like, the tone of the story comes from the sort of the way that the fantasy aspect works, the way that the magic works, so that we're almost pulling on horror ever so slightly. But the core of the story, we know what the story is about, and the horror almost aspects of the story are lifting that so that the crime is even a little bit more suspicious and a little bit grittier, and it's right, but it's lifting up that central story so that everything else is just moving in service to lift that story rather than feeling like it's distracted. And that's really the key there, is right, like knowing that inciting incident and knowing that central promise so that you can do all kinds of stuff as long as that stuff is in service of that core thread. And then you have something that's exciting and multi-dimensional and that even can pull different genre elements without your reader feeling like, I don't know what I signed up for here and I don't know what I got in the end either.
I agree. I'd love for you to, I think that sort of is a segue into the other aspect of how you then use that to spotlight your characters.
Yeah. So, the first step is like, you know what your central plot is, right? You know what your inciting incident is promising. After that, you get to develop conflicts that are going to move that central plot forward, and you're going to identify your conflicts that kind of come from outside in a way and bump into that central conflict so that you're creating, right, cohesion. So money is a problem for Stephanie Plum, so money keeps getting in the way while she's chasing Morelli. And it's giving her all of these opportunities to do all kinds of bonkers stuff. And it's creating the opportunities for Stephanie to showcase the unique way that she solves problems, the very unique way that she solves problems, by doing all kinds of things of questionable legality. But then what happens is, right, so we get this protagonist who's been shucked into this new scenario in this new world, and the people who already exist in her life are now having to respond to it. And this is where we talked about in the characters episode, this is how we get a scenario where Grandma Major has a gun in her hands. Because Stephanie's brought into this new world, she brings a gun home, and Grandma, who is all we already know is being unhinged, pulls that thing out, and we're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And it lets us see all of Grandma in all of her unhinged glory, so that we are looking forward to meeting her again in another story, right? In the next book, and the next one after that. And so what it's doing is your central plot is creating opportunities where your protagonist is solving problems, but also the characters who are adjacent to those scenarios or involved in those scenarios also get to shine. So the way that Morelli reacts to Stephanie and what she's doing gives Morelli a chance to shine. The way that Ranger reacts to Stephanie trying to solve problems really gives Ranger and his kind of dry sense of humor a chance to shine. And so that's kind of the way you think about it, is like you can keep it really focused and really tight, but then those conflicts are connected to your central plot and giving opportunities for your characters to just leap off the page and come alive with their own unique perspectives and reactions and interactions with the plot and the events of the plot and how your protagonist is handling that plot.
Listen, as you talked about it, I was like, and the dad who does not stop eating his pot roast when a gun goes off at the kitchen table.
He's like, I'm not letting this get cold. No, ma'am.
He's like, this some bull. Yeah, I think especially when you have such a big cast, and you are setting them up in a book one to come back again and again and again, that this is an opportunity to sort of not just set up the story and set up the series, but sort of get people on the hook for the ride. Yep. And I think that's what makes this great. Like, you do this well, you know, you don't blow it on book one. People will give you book two and book three, etc. I mean, which gives her to, again, 30 books later. I think those are the things that we have that we wanted to cover specifically Was there anything else that you wanted us to cover before we close out this episode?
No, I think, we hit all of my points, and I think that we really hit on some really important stuff, that whether you're doing a genre-bendy story or whether, your story is, straightforward crime start to finish, like whatever that genre is, like these are all opportunities that every story provides you, and if you take them, you will endear your readers to your story, which means even if it's not a serial, the next time they see your name pop up on the shelf, they are going to remember the experience that you gave them, and they're going to want to pick up your next book.
I also like, in closing for me, I like how this shows how the concepts of story are universal, right? Like we're talking about this story that, we're just going to totally agree on a woman sleuth. And the fact that you have some chick lit, some mystery,
Cozy adjacent.
Okay, cozy adjacent, action, comedy, like all of that. I think, but the great thing is that the undercurrent of all story and what we're aiming to deliver on as writers remains the same. And at the end of the day, I think it's just clarity, right? Because if you're clear about your delivery, then what gets to shine is the story. Yep. Point blank, period. The moment that it becomes confusing, their minds are on trying to satisfy that open loop that they can't figure out, and they miss everything else that you want to do. So even if it's in the most simplest way of just having a couple of sentences, just nailing that, driving that in, being really clear about what the external goal is, about what her motivations are, what is that core conflict that she's bumping up against or he's bumping up against, so that you are ensuring that you deliver those throughout, satisfying those throughout the story, that you just give yourself a firm foundation to have an amazing story. And so with that said, y'all, we are out. We already announced our next book, which is Beautifully Cruel.
Look forward to.
Oh, that sounds so exciting. It's going to be Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geisinger. As always, you do not have to read the stories. I think this episode alone was like so many gems that you didn't have to read either book to get something from. I think it's going to be interesting to have our full discussion on each one of the episodes on the next read. And we would love to hear your thoughts on this sort of book, one from the money that is genre bending, if you've read it before, or even if you haven't. I think being introduced to a book after having a discussion like this, I bet the thoughts around it are really different than if you just had a clean slate, no external input around the story before you hear these episodes. So with that said, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to visit us online at storydeepdive.com, where you can learn more about us. And we're going to have a new site or something coming up soon. And in the meantime, you can go there, leave your comments, any questions that you have, and we will be back with our first episode of our discussion and overview of Beautifully Cruel by J.T. Geisinger. In the meantime, you know the drill. Take care, and as always, happy writing. Goodbye.